Solidarity Forever is a great song. Not just a great labor union song, but just a great folk song in general. It was written by Ralph Chaplin, a trade union activist in 1915, and it was performed by many different artists. I personally listened to the Pete Seeger version because I think it's the most well-known version of them all. So if you've been to like political rallies or marches before, you've probably heard it. It's a timeless classic. When it comes to political music, it's really simple and it's catchy and it makes you want to sing along to it. And, presents a really straightforward socialist message. So I'm just going to break it down for you using a left-wing framework. The song begins with the phrase "Solidarity Forever" repeated 3 times and ends with the line, "For the union makes us strong." And this is the chorus as well. It's pretty straightforward and nothing fancy, and it emphasizes the need for all workers and trade unions to stand together in solidarity. Because as workers, it's only through collective action and unity that there's ever going to be a shot of fighting for better wages, working conditions, benefits, and ultimately socialism. So it goes, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. So the first verse goes, when the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. So the first verse section of this song emphasizes solidarity. Basically what I just described for the chorus. The line I want to emphasize is, quote, yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one, end quote. Our history books always tell us stories of great men and women throughout history who seemingly changed things by themselves. You have Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Vladimir Lenin, FDR, and all these, other historical figures. And it's really easy to condense history to the actions of a few larger-than-life individuals. It's just easier sometimes to read about the actions of one person rather than a detailed analysis of the historical conditions of that time period and the various factors that lead to, a certain result. But there's also more wicked reason. And by wicked, I don't mean cool, I mean, nefarious. By writing out the actions of the mass of people involved in, political activity that congealed around a certain issue, it strips the power of the mass of activists and the ordinary people that work together to bring about that change. By focusing on one extraordinary person, it turns the masses into a passive object waiting for the next savior to rise. But the reality is, throughout history, throughout these periods of immense change, there was a movement of people who came together and fought for change based on shared political interests. In my last couple episodes, I mentioned the New Deal era labor struggles, the civil rights movement, the Bernie Sanders campaign, the labor movement, and so on. It's never just one man. It's the historical factors along with a movement of people from different backgrounds fighting for a political cause. So you have the chorus again after the first verse, and then it jumps to the second verse where it goes, it is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving, mid the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. The second verse is sad and depressing, but it's also the damn truth. And the truth is a bitter pill to swallow, as they say. The entire verse captures exactly what is wrong with capitalism. We have huge and profitable companies like Amazon, Walmart, Apple, AT&T, and so on. The executives and CEOs of these companies make enormous amounts of money and are highly rich and wealthy. Just look at Jeff Bezos. A recent article actually came out that projected him to be a trillionaire by 2032. Let me just say that once more. A trillionaire. The Waltons, who own Walmart, are the richest family in the United States with a net worth of $160 billion. This is why that second verse is so poignant. The workers made the bosses rich. The Amazon warehouse worker that works for minimum wage and can barely take bathroom breaks made Jeff Bezos who he is. The Walmart worker who is making pitifully low wages, so low that the taxpayer subsidized them with food stamps, got the Waltons to where they were. The workers made these companies successful. We have 3 people owning as much wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. The top 5% of Americans own 2/3 of the wealth. We have such immense inequality, it's mind-boggling. Working people have seen labor unions decimated, stagnant wages, over 500,000 medical bankruptcies, over 14% unemployment in the United States, with over 30 million people filing for unemployment. Even in the current COVID-19 crisis, people are getting crumbs from the government, while corporations and Wall Street are receiving trillions of dollars. Even in this pandemic, we're seeing a rising and booming stock market, even with record levels of unemployment. So the words, "Now we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made," it's never rung so true. The system is completely broken. Let me just throw in some Marxism into this. Let's say you're hired for $20 an hour. You're getting paid $20 an hour for your work, but the value or the profit you generate past that $20 the company is paying you an hour is going to the company. So let's just say you work in Apple selling iPhones. You sell an iPhone to a customer, that's like $1,000 right there, because, iPhones are obviously expensive. So are you getting that $1,000? Hell no. That goes straight to the company coffers. But you made that sale. You worked your butt off to approach that customer, convince them that this was a great phone, and you got them to fork over that credit card to make that purchase. But all you get is that $20 an hour, and even though you worked your tail off to make that sale. Another example. You have an Amazon worker working long hours in the warehouse, boxing up things and getting things ready to be shipped off to all the customers in the world, in the United States, etc., etc. You're making minimum wage, maybe a little bit more, yet all these profits go to the executives, the shareholders, to Jeff Bezos, who, like I said, is poised to be a trillionaire in 2032. Now, was it Jeff Bezos that toiled on the warehouse floor? Was it the shareholders that coded the software? Was it the board of directors that built the cars? You have workers slaving away at a job for 8+ hours a day, while the people on top get the hefty paychecks, the bonuses, the stock options, and more. Simply through ownership of the company, they get a fat cut of the profits, while the working man gets crumbs. Talk about parasites. Let me just say this bluntly. For those who believe that you could simply get out of this hellhole by finding a better employer, you're never going to get paid the value of what you bring into the company, because that's not how capitalism works. I hear a lot of people say things like, "Oh, I'm going to get paid my full value when I look for a job," or, "Oh, make sure that employer pays you for the full value of your work." Look, you will never have that happening, because the profits the company makes are wages not paid to the worker. Therefore, if everyone was to get their full value of what they produced, company profits would equal zero and the company would shut down. Just wanted to clear that out of the way. Anyways, going back to the song, after the verse, we hear the Solidarity Forever chorus, and then we move on to another verse, which goes, "They have taken untold millions that they've never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong." So this is another great verse. The first part of it kind of repeats what I said earlier about how workers are actually the ones who are bringing in value to the company. They're the ones working their tail off so the owners, the shareholders, and the bosses get the profits. But here's the little kicker that this verse talks about. Quote, "But without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong." End quote. You, the worker, actually have power. Imagine if you called in sick to work one day. Your coworkers would probably be more busy. Maybe the company has one less person on the sales floor to talk to customers. Maybe things become less efficient. It's pretty disruptive when one person has to take a day off or calls in sick. Now imagine if all the workers of the company go on strike or stop working. No one is working the machines, no one's coding the new software, no one is making sales. Production and distribution comes to a halt. The flow of profits dries up. The worker, by not working, has the ability to bring the company down and exert their demands on the bosses. Now here's the really important part. It can't be done by just one person. Capitalist bosses rule through fear, coercion, and divisiveness. One worker not working won't make a difference. The manager can just fire him or her and nothing changes. But when workers organize, form a union, work together, and take action through collective struggle, the power is magnified greatly. This is why the labor union is such a powerful tool, and it's important that we support trade unionists and trade unions. It's one of the few, if not the only institutions out there that is an association of working people that can put pressure on employers and the state to better pay and working conditions. It's also been attacked and weakened for the past 6 to 7 decades. So if we're serious about building a political movement to challenge and take power, it would be silly not to include organized labor in the process. So we're going into the last part of the song. We hear the chorus and now the last verse. And it goes, "In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong." And then the song ends with the repeat of the chorus. So in regards to the last verse, I like it a lot, particularly the last part where Pete Seeger says, "We can bring a birth to a new world from the ashes of the old." So throughout modern history, we've had people across the world try to create a better society. Whether it's through anti-colonial struggles in Africa and Asia, the Paris Commune, the October Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, people struggled to fight for a better future. Now obviously some of these movements succeeded, but many failed. Some governments did things well and some didn't. They were products of the historical realities that surrounded them. But whatever the outcome was, the fight for equality, human freedom, and justice goes on. The struggle is never easy, and I think about what Cornel West says about fortitude. There's going to be many defeats, but we have to fortify ourselves and be strong. And, it's easy to be demoralized, it's easy to lose faith, but we have to keep pushing on. Professor Adolph Reed Jr., one of my intellectual inspirations, analogized this fight to Pavlov's house in the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. There was a Red Army soldier named Sergeant Yakov Pavlov who held this house, this apartment, with his men for 2 months while the Battle of Stalingrad raged around him. And he held the house because those were his orders, and he fought on irrespective of what was happening in the greater battle. So even though there may be defeats, even if the situation is grim, we all have to do our jobs to make the prospect of a better future a reality. So 100 years ago, we didn't have stuff that we take for granted today. The 8-hour workday, vacation time, sick leave in some places, child labor laws, workplace safety standards, a minimum wage, a 2-day weekend. We take all this stuff for granted, but back then, we didn't have any of this. Workers fought together, and in some cases died to obtain these benefits. Now, it doesn't have to be relegated to labor issues, and the emphasis on solidarity doesn't have to be strictly limited to trade unionism, although it's a great place to start. Victory can only be achieved when people come together and fight for a common political goal. It can be through, your local community, your neighborhood, your city, the state level, the national level. It's through interactions with your family, your neighbors, your church, your school, the workplace, your union, your friends, and so on. It's going to be through these everyday encounters that we can build a political project for a more just and fair society. And it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of setbacks. There's going to be a lot of losses. But I always keep bringing up the Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016 and 2020. There's people out there who are interested in tangible policy proposals for a more egalitarian and compassionate society. The task at hand is converting that energy and those interests into long-standing bonds and relationships that can be sustained and used for political action at the local, state, and ultimately national level. This is why the line, "Solidarity Forever," is so critical. Underneath its simple message, there's truth in it in terms of political organizing. Regardless of our religious affiliation, our job, our skin color, our sexuality, or background, we've come together because this particular issue concerns us and we want to make it happen. So, just mull over that for a bit, take a listen to the song, enjoy it, but take it to heart as well.